Sorry, I'm on a phone, so I don't know if it's not like the regular screen or it's very small.
Yes, you're live now. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Hi, this is Bevan Bucheister. I'm the chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. So if anybody is listening tonight, then welcome. And I believe, can they put questions in the chat box? If there is
no, they need to submit questions ahead of time.
Okay, so they're not on Zoom. All right. So, I mean, I guess you can email us if you have questions, but I'll start with the roll call of members. I think we don't have a quorum tonight, so we're going to hold the minutes until we get another member. So Ann Stevenson.
Here.
And Randy Rao.
Here.
Okay, and Kate Bohannon.
Here, and Paul is joining shortly. He just told me.
All right, well, when he joins, can somebody let me know if you see him join, and then we can stop and approve the minutes.
Okay.
And then we also had on our agenda to nominate a vice chair, but we're going to have to hold that until Paul comes on as well. So I believe, Kate, you had volunteered to be the vice chair, and I hadn't heard from anybody else unless I missed an email. But if anybody else is interested, also, please let us know.
I think that's because we heartily endorse.
Okay, good.
Oh no.
Okay, so the other thing is we do have 2 seats vacant now, and we have Jeremy Hansen is also with us tonight, and he's been coming for many, many months, and I know he's applied to be on the commission. So I just wanted to ask the staff what was the status of his pending application, and then also mention that we need to do outreach for a new member, and wanted to ask the staff, how we could help with that. And we were particularly interested in diversifying our commission and reaching out to the Black or Hispanic community, and getting a member from the Black or Hispanic community. And I know Kate did some outreach, and we did also last time as well that we had an opening, and we were not successful reaching somebody from the Hispanic community, but I think we should still keep trying. So want to invite Jackie or Racine to let us know what's happening with the pending application for Jeremy Hansen.
Hillary can better address that.
Okay.
So we do have an application for Mr. Hansen. It's been pending for some time. The council stopped reviewing all boards and commissions appointments during COVID, but they have started up again. So it hopefully will make it onto the Environmental Matters Committee meeting agenda this month, and then it can proceed to full council. Hopefully by the end of October, you'll have at least one new member, and I have one other application for the mayor to review as well.
Okay. All right, great. Good to hear. Thanks. So then I'd like...
And Bevan.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just to chime in on that, would like to invite you, Jeremy, to the Environmental Matters Committee. If it makes it on the agenda, we would love to hear from you if you're available. It's around 3 p.m. on a Wednesday.
Wednesday, is it coming up?
It's in a few weeks, but we'll see if it makes it on the agenda or not. It's going to be on
October 20 something.
Actually, I don't have it on my calendar for some reason.
October 21st?
No, I think it's going to be October 14th.
It's October. It's on the calendar for October 21st at 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure I could join in.
Okay, great.
And I just want to make a pitch for Jeremy and say that he's runs the expert panel committee at the Bay program. So I've worked with him professionally for a few years, and they are the ones that set the BMP pollution reduction values for all the different approved BMPs. So it would be really great to have somebody who's involved and connected with the Bay program on our commission as well. So also welcome Alderwoman Tierney, and want to also welcome Alderman Savage. and he had asked to update us on his upcoming agenda. So I have you on the agenda for about 30 minutes so we can have a conversation about the things that are either, before the council now, or the things that you are planning to bring up this year. So I'll, hand it over to you, Rob.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so thank you very much, Bevan and Kate, for getting me on the agenda today. You're even getting this information before the Environmental Matters Committee. Sorry, Ellie. But what I'm trying to do here is, and I'll put it on my screen, and I'm not sure if Bevan sent you, I sent her an earlier draft, but I'm gonna make sure that you get a copy of this after the meeting that you can take a look at.
Okay, thanks.
And hopefully, I'm going to try to make some of your future meetings now and then, and have this be an ongoing discussion, because what I'm trying to do is, and granted, I think we probably should have been doing this all along, but in any case, since I only have 1 year left until the end of this term, hopefully I'll be reelected, but you never know. And so I thought I'd map out some legislation, both environmental and non-environmental, although the only thing I'm going to be going over with you today is the environmental legislation. Things that I'm aiming to do, things I want to introduce, legislation I want to introduce every month until June of next summer, because of the way the election is, or in terms of how long it takes legislation to go through the process, the latest we can introduce legislation is July of 2021. And so it's not a lot of time, especially for some larger pieces of legislation that can take quite a bit of time to go through the process. And so, again, so with 1 year, I thought it'd be good to map it out. So what I've done is kind of put together a list based on just a rough list. I expect it to change based on conversations with this commission, but also conversations with my colleagues on the Environmental Commission. But I've just roughed out basically some more substantive legislation, 1 or 2 pieces of substantive legislation I'd like to introduce each month, and then some quick legislation, which is just kind of smaller pieces of legislation that are pretty easy to digest, that I want to do each month as well. And I may not make it. For example, in September, I was hoping to get to a revision of the sediment control code, but instead I'm working on some other things and wasn't able to get to it. So it's all very tentative, and I, again, fully expect it to change. So what I thought would be helpful to do first is to, I think, talk about what's on the agenda currently, to see if you have any questions. I think the only piece of environmental legislation, at least that's occurring to me now, is one dealing with prohibited discharges on construction sites. And it was a very simple kind of piece of legislation. I just, one of our meetings, I just quickly sent a request to the law office to get something drafted. And the intention, I submitted the request around the time when the South Annapolis Yacht Center was, we had some complaints about litter and debris getting blown into the creek there. And when we looked at the code, there just wasn't it wasn't too clear in terms of requiring that they secure their sites overnight, in terms of securing not just the trash and other debris, but any other potential pollutant on their properties before it rains and every night. And so that's all the legislation would do. It expands the list of pollutants to include litter, and just requires that they button that up every night. And I think that's already been through. The public hearing was yesterday. I think that's going to be pretty easy to go through the process. I think I already have 5 co-sponsors on there. I thought, Alderman Tierney, is there anything else I'm missing from environmental legislation going through the process right now?
No, I think it's, well, it was sort of mentioned in the Maritime Task Force that we'll be looking at water access, so that's somewhat related. But
Yeah, that'll be a good one to keep an eye on. Alderman Arnett is leading that charge on setting up a task force to look at the maritime zoning in the city. And the only wards that have maritime zoning are my ward, which is Ward 7, Ward 1, Alderman Tierney, and then Ward 8, which is Alderman Arnett. And one of the things that they're tasked with looking at is, as the Alderwoman said, is public water access. And yeah, so I think that's about, the other thing is Alderwoman Tierney does have, I think of a resolution, I think, dealing with transportation,
right from
electric
yeah.
vehicles standards and laws. And it's a, do you want to say anything else about that?
Well, it's just it's a letter of support. Basically, it was initiated by the Transportation Commission to support. I lost my train of thought. To support autonomous vehicles, and in line with federal legislation, and just acknowledge that we need to start looking at regulations for them, because inevitably they'll be coming, but there's not enough legislation right now or guidelines. So this is just to support that initiative so that they're safe.
Yeah.
And that was from Kurt Riegel, is the chair of transportation, and they drafted a resolution, and then I just sort of emulated it. And I think that went, I think that went through first reader last night, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if this commission ever has a resolution that you'd like us to consider introducing, we're always welcome to, we're always open to do that. I guess where I'd like to go next is starting with, I'm gonna see if I can share my, oh, go ahead. Oh yeah, sorry, any questions on that part?
The site development, the prohibited discharges, when I looked at that last night, it's, I just looked at the whole site development code that was listed with it and the stuff that hadn't changed. And the one thing that you and I and Kate noticed when we did our walkabout, pre-COVID, of development sites to look and see, what was wrong with them. We noticed that there was no posting of a person in charge that you could get in touch with to notify them if there's any discharge coming off their property. So when I was looking at the new part that you put in about the litter, above that, there was a section about, they have to provide a contact information for developers, have to, for their site, provide a contact information that, of somebody that can be reached 24/7. But it doesn't say who they have to provide it to. Obviously, they have to provide it to the city. But then if the city's closed on the weekend, it still doesn't provide anybody who's walking by the opportunity to go, okay, let's call the developer and get it fixed. And that's really the first line of defense. And I thought we did have that law. And so we thought that they were posting it in violation, but it's not a violation. They don't have to post it, but they really should. I mean, that's really the first line of defense. I took this field, course with Richard Klein on this years ago. And, that's the first thing you want to do, is stop the pollution, and any citizen can get it stopped if they have their name posted there, and the developers will come out and, remediate right then and there. So I think that's, if there's an opportunity to amend that prohibited discharge, that might be a good thing to put in there too. I know DC already does it. Every construction site I walk by in DC has a name listed, and you can call them if there's something wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And especially if the language is already there that we can work with. If it isn't, then I can always add it to my list when I overhaul the sediment control code. But I do agree that that's certainly needed. So I'll put that on our list. We can talk about it at the Environmental Matters, because this still has to go through that entire process. And I need to get in a better habit of making sure I specifically refer legislation to this commission. But even if even if we don't, you're always welcome to submit comments to us, to the Environmental Matters Committee or myself. And so this is a good one. If
Okay.
anybody's able to make it to the next meeting, we can certainly discuss this. And also,
Okay.
it's still there are also a few amendments to this legislation from Jackie Kyle. I believe were included in your staff report, so we'll also talk about those.
Rob,
Yes.
hello?
Who is this?
Oh, hi,
Oh,
Paul.
Paul.
Murphy.
Hi, Paul.
So Bevan, good point. And some of this may already be occurring, so excuse me if the city has this. A couple of things. Do we have a 311 type system where civic-minded people can take a photo of pollution and text it or email it to a site, some portion of the city? So now they may not see it on a Sunday, the city employee may not see it on a Sunday morning, but it'll be there Monday morning. It's documented. Is there a place citizens can email or text photos to the city to document? And then also, if we do have a name for each development, a person, they could be copied on it also. So not only do you get the developer, and I don't expect any employee of a development company to be available 168 hours a week, but they should be responsive 6 days a week. So two questions there is, do we have a way for me to text a photo of something I think is egregious?
Yeah, I don't believe we have any kind of phone system like that. I think that's a great idea. The county has their 311.
Yeah, or whether it's phone, text, or email. Texting would seem to be the easiest way. But people ought to be able to take photos and say, this is what I saw, boom, it's date stamped Sunday morning. But, so I think that would,
We just
yes,
sent
go
it
ahead.
also.
Paul?
Jackie.
We don't have a 311 direct number, but there is on the city's website, and it's on the main landing page as well as on the Office of Environmental Policies page where you can report a problem. And that goes into the iWorks system for Public Works, and all complaints are processed through there. So there is a record of a report if someone does. And I think it's generally, it breaks down to them sending an email notifying of an issue.
Okay, well, that's great. And I would say, even though I'm moderately plugged into this, I wasn't sure. And it's, sometimes it's hard to track that stuff down. The simpler we can make it for the citizen, the better. And as Bevan was saying, on a board, assigned by every development, if you see a problem, call Charlie Smith at the Acme Development Company. It ought to be signage, posting on not only that development board, but maybe, and I don't mean to get too far off track, but other parks around town, when you go to these little pocket parks at the end of the street, pick up there should be some things, pick up your dog poop, the basic, some things. And also, if you see problems, send it to email 123@annapolis.gov. I'm just make things more prevalent so it's easier for people to do the right thing.
Yeah, or Paul, I was even thinking just add that also to the signs of that the developers would have to post and, report to the city.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In addition to that, some of these little places around town, where appropriate, we have some signage that could be added. So not just on a development board, but, I could be at a pocket park and there's some sailboat profusely leaking fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's not going to be a development board there, but somebody's pissed off and they see make it easier to report it.
Right. I know people send me stuff and then they just go, because I know they know.
Yeah, that's people who know you. I'm just talking about, just want to make it easier for John Q. Public. I think I got my point across, so you can proceed.
I agree.
Bevan, are we able to share our screen in this meeting?
I asked Hillary, but I believe we are.
Yes.
Okay, can I just quickly share an example of what we're talking about? This, okay, I clicked share screen. All right,
Okay.
here it is. So that, hopefully you can see this. This is the DC version of what we're referring to, where there's a contact number, the address of the property, and then, so this was posted at a construction site. So I think this is kind of what we're going for.
Yep. Right. We could just copy that. and I'm probably a certain material too, that it's not just a paper that it's going to erode. You know, you have to, it has to be visible and read that.
Okay, I'll forward this to everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate.
Devin, it's Ellie. This is kind of frustrating for me because as a builder, that this is always a requirement to have that sign on a job site saying, you know, who do you call if a problem? And I'm asking, and I don't know who on this panel might know the question, is it should be in a construction permit application. That's usually where that is. I mean, obviously it isn't happening. So I'll look at that and see, or ask maybe Director Johnson if that is in our permit requirement, because it's super important. You know, 24/7 on
Right.
we can have a contact on the job site.
It is to a certain degree. The grading permits and the building permits all have contact information for the inspectors, and so for the grading permit, they list stormwater engineer number, I believe, unless that's changed.
But do they need to post a sign? They should.
It's right on the green or orange permit that they post. It's, I mean, I'm not saying I disagree. I do think we should have just a more concise one for environmental issues and a phone number or a text number, but we do at least have a phone number up there now.
Yeah, obviously there's a disconnect and it's not happening.
Yeah.
Unless that's changed. Director Johnson, do you know if anything's changed with that?
I don't know that anything's changed with that, but I think that I don't think the city currently for projects has a requirement for a project sign, and that might be what would help, would address the concerns that are raised.
Post it. The code doesn't say, so it would help with the.
Right. So I mean, that could occur as, would require a code change, because if you don't do that, you'll have developers who will push back and say, adding cost, who's going to pay for it, blah, blah, and things of that nature. But if you make it mandatory through the code, and that's a fairly simple change to the code, then it would sort of address the problem. And, I think that's the easiest way to address it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because even though it's on the permit isn't really, visible. So it's not that useful to the public.
Okay. All right. Well, we spent a lot of time on this, so I want to give the time back to Rob, and we'll follow up on that.
All right. Thank you. Very good suggestions, and we will take a closer look at them. All right. I'm going to try to share my screen here. There it is. All right. So this is the memo that the Environmental Commission sent to the mayor and the city council back in early 2018. This has your list of priorities, long and near-term and long-term priorities. And so I thought it'd be good to start here in terms of things you've already identified. And I don't know if anybody needs me to zoom in or not on this. But in any case, so the stuff I've marked in green are things that we've already passed. And I think this is also good to look at, just to give you the idea that we are indeed trying to listen to the commission and listen to your feedback. So the near-term priorities, we have the no discharge zone that's been approved. And that's, I think, in the federal government's hand right now in terms of final approval, but the city did approve that. Number 2 is the update to the 2004 City of Annapolis Parks, Recreation and Open Space Recreation Plan, and include a master greenway. I put in progress because I know that many of you are currently working on the Greenway with, or I think some of you are working on the Greenway with the Conservancy Board, who is working with Plan and Zoning to get that included in the next comp plan, hopefully. Now, as far as the recreation open space plan, I don't know if there's a specific plan to update that. Maybe my colleague knows, Alderman Tierney, but at least the Greenway is in progress. Number 3 is coordinate environmental policies, programs, and investment across city departments by creating a creeks cabinet or river cabinet. That's been done. We've had a couple meetings so far. Number 4 is modify the Forest Conservation Act to create a true no net loss of forest law. We did that. And number 5, clarify allowable uses of the city's watershed restoration fund. We did do much of this because the language for the fund was actually updated and I had some language included in that put in there a reporting requirement. So with every budget, we should be getting a list of how the money how exactly the money is being spent every year. So if there's anything else on that one, I'd still be happy to work on that further. Number 6 is improving street sweeping practices. I put, this is in red just because I'm not exactly sure the status. I said we'll verify with staff, and maybe Director Johnson knows, but I know you had, if you go down below in the document, if I can find it, let's see, number 6, yeah, number 6, there's some specific recommendations you had for street sweeping, I think including things like putting up signs and making sure the vehicles are moved and that kind of thing. I'm not sure we've done that yet, but you know, just also thought it'd be good to point this out to Director Johnson for future
Could I just say something, Rob, real quickly?
Yeah, of course.
I left off with that with David Jarrell because Truxton Heights was volunteered to be sort of the guinea pig on alternating sides, et cetera. And at the time, I think it was before budget finalization, David Jarrell said that that DPW was going to hire a sort of a liaison or assign somebody as sort of this street cleaning liaison. And I didn't know if Director Johnson had any update or anything further on that.
I am not aware of that. I mean, it's something that it could have occurred,
Yeah.
but I would have to check on that and I could get back to
Yeah,
the group.
it talked to David Jarrell. There was going to be some sort of liaison with the city to coordinate this, and unless we cut it out of the budget, that might have been.
Since it's related to the TMDLs, it might. I don't know if it was something that the city manager or director were thinking of including with one of the new. Remember, there's a second stormwater engineer that it was in the budget, is in the budget, that still I think needs to be hired. Maybe that person. And
so just for context for Director Johnson, because I know he's new, the reason why we brought this up is because the street sweepers, as we have observed for many, many years, are doing the middle of the street, but they're not doing where the cars are parked, where all the leaves are piled up. So, and I know we're claiming credits for this for our, you know, our watershed implementation plan and for our TMDL, but you know, it's not really getting the debris off the street. So, you know.
Yeah, I just had a very brief conversation with the facilities staff, the maintenance staff about the street sweeping, and we were just in concept. I wasn't aware of this memo, talking about piloting like an alternate side of the street sweeping schedule, kind of like a program. But because of the parking stress in Annapolis, it has to be a pilot program before we roll it out, so we work out the kinks. Because parking is at a premium, on-street parking is at a premium. And we have to sort of make sure that what we roll out doesn't really overly disrupt the calm in the community, to put it that way. So it would seem like that would be at least that was my initial thought. But if I could get a copy of this memo, that'd be helpful.
Before you even said it, is that we have to send you this memo. So sorry.
Could I add one thing about this, if you don't mind? One challenge on our street just as an example around street sweeping, is that there's a vehicle that's not operable but parked on our street, and it blocks a drain, but parking enforcement will not take it away. And so I wonder what the relationship is between street sweeping and parking enforcement, and if that's something, if we do address a new policy or the pilot that you're speaking of, Alderwoman Tierney, I wonder if coordination with parking enforcement could be part of that pilot, because that seems to be a breakdown on our street, just as an example.
But funny you should ask, because I introduced legislation last night on towing. That seems to be what the obstacle is there, is that I finally put in one place in the code the requirements for towing, so that SP Plus isn't gun shy, for lack of a better word, on towing, and that's one of the situations. So
that sounds wonderful. I'll be so excited.
I really love the towing here, but.
All right, I'm gonna
So,
try to.
everyone,
Paul.
Rob?
Yeah, I just wanted to make, before we go to you, Paul, I just wanted to point out.
Okay,
that
go ahead.
In terms of the time requirement, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Still have a lot more to get through.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Oh.
Okay, well, so yeah, just to continue on, and I'll try to go through these faster. Number 7, we have ensure the stormwater practices that are mandated by law do not qualify for discounts on the stormwater utility fee. That's also something I need to look into more. Maybe we can bring it up one of the environmental matter committee meetings as well, if you don't find an answer before then. Number 8 is increase the amount of stormwater runoff treated on redevelopment projects from 50 to 100%. We did do that. I think we did 75%. I believe Public Works actually raised that to 100.
I think we're doing 125%.
Yeah, I think it's 125 for new development, but I'm not
for redevelopment. Okay.
Yeah, but I think 100% for re. So going down the long-term priorities under water quality, have incentivized developers to treat 100% of stormwater. Oh, we already said that. That's been done. Strengthen city critical area law. That also has been done. And just to point out to the commission, legislation I forgot to mention. So after we strengthen the critical area law, and again, I'm quite confident in saying, I checked with the critical area commission, we have the strongest critical area law in the state now since we've updated it. We expanded the habitat protection areas. We added protection for ephemeral streams and their buffers and steep slopes, and expanded some of that protection to even the intense development areas for the critical area. But in any case, after that was passed, I had to go back to the critical area commission for comments. And so the legislation that's in the process now are just some tweaks from the critical area commission. There's nothing substantive. It's just basically some things they needed us to add in there, some language they needed us to add in there. It doesn't really change anything major.
After we all discussed that, Rob, there was another issue that came up, and we had commented on it, and it was basically, it was very fuzzy on what was considered pervious and impervious surface, and this homeowner made a case for a deck being impervious surface, and they did all these kind of rain calculations. So I mean, I think we might have the strongest now, but we still can't save trees because we're in the intensely developed area, and people put a deck out and call it a pervious surface, and then when they want to build over the deck, they call it an impervious surface. So there's still a lot of wiggle room to get through and build there. So we want to look
aware of that at the time, so we can certainly take a look at that in terms
we weren't
of
either.
and I think that's a problem in the state critical area guidelines for a deck and that kind of thing. But in terms of the forest, we did expand some of the forest protection for the IDA. It's not as strong as the other ones, so there is some in there, but I haven't taken another look at that as well. But that legislation,
still on our... Okay.
Yeah, and maybe now's a good time, actually, if we could have that be an amendment to the legislation that is in the process now from the Kirk-Larry Commission, if we wanted to tweak anything else.
Okay.
So the third item under water quality is enforce policies to reach tree canopy goal of 50% by 2036. Because right now those goals don't really have the strength of law. And so I put in progress because I'm hopeful that that will be included in the comprehensive plan as well. But as once I get to my list, you'll see I have some, I'd like to revisit the Forest Conservation Act. Sorry, Helly. A couple other tweaks on that law. And we could always throw this in there as well. The fourth item here is incorporating stormwater practices into the capital improvement plan. I think we've already done this because I know we've had a lot of discussion in the CIP about some of the use of the watershed restoration fund that has to get accounted for in the capital improvement plan. Under climate change, renewable energy, first one's identify a sustainable funding source for climate change adaptation improvements. I have that as incomplete, but actually maybe we should put in progress because we do have the Resilience Authority, which the mayor successfully got the state to, along with the county executive, lobbied the state to get the authority to do that locally. So that is in progress. Second was increase a minimum certification required to meet the city's green building code. As you'll see, I have that scheduled on my list. Divest city retirement accounts from fossil fuel investment. That's also something I added to my list. And then
say that again, Rob.
Yeah, sure. Paul?
Rob, repeat that last topic.
Divest city retirement accounts from fossil fuel investments.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
Fourth one's urge the Baltimore Regional Cooperative Purchasing Committee to phase out fossil fuels basically and go more towards renewable. I think that's, I have that scheduled because I added that to my list. I think we could very easily pass a resolution asking for that from the council. Let's see. Fifth one is, and maybe the mayor probably would be willing to do that even without the council resolution. But the fifth one is provide information and incentives for developers to take advantage of renewable energy and energy efficiency options. I have that as incomplete because I don't believe we have Director Gould or Ms. Hoda, please correct me if I'm wrong, or Director Johnson, but I don't think we have anything in place. The last one's exploring opportunities to build community solar. Also have that as incomplete. I know we talked about that in the past, but it gets tricky when you're, if we start to promote private. I'm not sure, Racine, do you know if that's included in any of the environmental stewardship materials?
The solar, no, it's not.
So under waste reduction, you've listed explore feasibility of citywide residential composting program. I have that as in progress because as you may be aware, I mean, I don't think it was really advertised too widely, but in the last budget, the city manager and Public Works, so we passed a CIP item to start a composting program, municipal composting program for city waste. And if that's successful over the next few years, the hope is that we can turn that into a residential composting program.
How much city waste? When I think of waste, of composting, I think of food. How much does the city government doesn't incur that much food waste? It's the restaurants and the residents.
Yeah,
but we do have a lot of vegetative waste resulting from like the landscaping activities.
Okay.
Yeah,
good,
so
good point.
that's probably what's being referred to. We don't generate. You're correct. We don't generate food waste, but a lot of other vegetative waste that could support a program like that.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, exactly. See, the second item there is consider requiring events over a certain size to meet the requirements of the Annapolis Environmental Stewardship Certification Program. I've also added that to my list for this next year. I think it's a great idea. The third item is create an optional subscription service for citywide commercial recycling. I have maybe completed, maybe somebody else knows. I thought that we had a program available. Maybe it was just for certain streets in the city where they could sign on to or join on to the city's recycling contractor. But I need to look into that, and maybe somebody else knows here. So the last item is work with the state commission on the capital city to limit waste from Naval Academy football games. I think that's a good idea. I have that as incomplete though. We should be able to do that without any kind of legislation, but maybe
Right.
I'll speak to the mayor and
The
is that your
capital
Ellie or
Commission-
Fred?
Do
Sorry,
we
Bevan?
still have a capital city commission? I'm not sure if that's up and running. It used to be something, but it hadn't been running for years and years. So that's the
Yeah, I
governor,
don't know.
the commandant or the superintendent and the mayor used to get together and talk about issues that, and then, you know, get quick resolution to city, state, Naval Academy issues. I'm not even sure if it's active anymore.
Okay. Yes, that needs a little more research. I'm going to try to share my list now. Sorry, I'm going a bit quick here. I'm just trying to be time sensitive here. And again, this is certainly welcome to have more conversations about this in the future.
I just want to let you know that I cannot see the clock on my phone, so I'm not keeping track of time. So I'm just depending on you to do it.
Okay, it's
Or-
7:50.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
So, and again, so thank you for putting out that memo. That is very helpful. I think we need to try to discuss that more on the Environmental Matters Committee. So if you come up with any kind of update on that, I'd be happy to take another look.
Mhm.
So in terms of the roadmap I've identified, again, using some of your documents, but also some of my own that I've had. Let's see, September. Again, I'd hope to do a sediment control update in September, but have other things that are occupying my time. But I did get, so in terms of the breakdown, I have substantive legislation, which are just, you know, something akin to like critical area update or forest conservation, which are very large and time consuming. Quick legislation are just things that are, you know, a couple paragraphs and easy to pass, hopefully easy to develop. So for this, I just have, and I suppose this isn't necessarily environmentally focused, but Indigenous Peoples Day, turning Columbus into Indigenous Peoples Day. That's already been introduced on first reader. In October, we have, and again, if you have any comments on this, you can submit it to me today or anytime in the future. And some of this legislation listed may not even end up being pursued. You know, I have things on here I'm not entirely sure on in terms of, in November, I've listed a potential ban on accepting campaign contributions from developers. This is something that the county executive has wanted to pursue. It's something that they've done in Prince George's County and I think Frederick County. But I'm not entirely sure it's legal for a municipality to do it. And I'm not entirely sure if I would have enough support to do it. So if it's illegal, obviously I'm not going to introduce it. And if there's just not an appetite on the council, I may just not waste my time on it. So this is all just kind of tentative in that sense. But my hope is that by giving you a heads up on this in terms of what might be coming down the pipeline is you can submit any kind of specific recommendations or changes that you think should be made before the legislation gets written or submitted. Now, there's always the legislative process. So once things get introduced, you can certainly discuss it and submit changes when it's going through the committee process. And that's how it's been working. But in this case, in this instance, you can certainly send it to me beforehand. So for October, I had two pieces of substantive legislation. One is the sediment control overhaul, and that's just, updating our standards to meet with these larger storm events we have, but also trying to improve the transparency and see if there are any improvements we need to make on the enforcement or aspect of it. And the second piece for under there is adding water access to our adequate public facilities code. This is in response to some of the things that have been in the newspaper about projects like South Annapolis Yacht Center, just making sure they include public water access. And my idea is that adequate public facilities currently look at adequate recreation facilities, adequate transportation, school capacity, adequate stormwater, and we have nothing for public water access. So I think if it's a waterfront development, that they should be having to factor that in. So quick legislation in October, I had the Green Building Code overhaul. Currently, public buildings are required to be LEED Silver or equivalent. So that's city buildings, and then private buildings over a certain size are required to be LEED certified or equivalent. So I'd like to increase this to gold and silver respectively. So gold for city buildings and silver for private buildings. The other thing to consider, I guess, is whether if you think the size should be changed. So I can't think of the standard off the top of my head, but it has to do with, I think, certain size or number of buildings. So we could just have that required on any kind of new buildings. They have to comply with the Green Building Code, or even perhaps renovations over a certain size. Additions over a certain size. And if anybody wants me to slow down or spend more time talking about something, let me know.
A little concerned that has it's going to have conflicts with the affordable housing,
I had a statement.
More affordable housing. Go ahead, Randy.
Have you thought about introducing any legislation as it relates to the big discrepancy amongst access and education as it relates to environmental education and literacy? The state has a mandate for, it's one of the first, it was the first state in the country to mandate environmental literacy and education. So being the fact that we have a really huge gap as it relates to the equality in our city, as it relates to access to waterways, is also as well culturally appropriate language and as it relates to the education field. So I'm just curious, so I know also the discrepancy in the funding for projects around environmental restoration or environmental education or outreach as it relates to projects funding. Are you looking to do any legislation or has any of those things crossed your mind? Just curious.
Yeah, in terms of the environmental education, I think that's a very huge need. There's only limited things that the city council can do. Education, the schools are not under our control. We could certainly submit recommendations, or the environmental commission, the city's environmental commission, I think would also. So you could also get in touch. Might be worth having a joint meeting of sorts with the education commission to build relations with them to hear from your commission, because I think that's a great thing for them to be thinking about as well. So, but that said, we have the CRAB, the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating, and I think that's going to help at least with some of the water access, but also education. They already have taken some of the students from Georgetown East Elementary out there to their facility at Sandy Point, which again they're going to be relocating to Ward 7 off on Edgewood Road there, or Bend Bay Beach Road. And so that's an opportunity to get the kids out there. I know the Moyer administration had developed a clean air education program packet of information that they tried to get the schools to adopt. Now, the limitation now would simply be funding to do that, but I'm certainly open to any other ideas on that. in terms of what the city council can do. So if the commission has developed any kind of recommendations along that, please do let us know in the future.
So we haven't developed any, but we will certainly be talking about it. And I know,
Okay.
you know, like the legislature, the state legislature doesn't really get involved in, you know, details of what's in, you know, what the educational, you know, the content, but they did, you know, require public education for, you know, environmental education. But one thing where I think the city could do, you know, outreach and education is we have a requirement to do that for our MS4 permit. So I don't know what we do for that now, but that's a requirement that we have to do. So are we reaching all of our communities with that education and outreach? That would be a question. So, I mean, that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I know we do, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hodo, but I know we do have I believe we have an environmental stewardship program for schools, not necessarily education oriented, but in any case, Randy, I missed the last question you had.
The last one was about the large discrepancy amongst funding that has gone out for projects as it relates to Black and Brown community people getting funds for environmental restoration projects. And were you looking at trying to bring a little equity to that in some way or shape or form through particular legislation or programming? And then also I wanted to throw in there the access to open space for recreation for some of the more low-income communities. There's been a big problem with that in the city for years now. The tale of two cities is true. But a lot of there even sites here in Annapolis, people are told that they can't use for different programs and have to go to General's Highway. So that's another big issue that I just feel like maybe with some support that could change, and providing more open spaces for our youth to have activities at, especially during COVID, where open space is one of the more less risky things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we actually spoke about at the council meeting last night, in terms of how to improve access, transportation, to make sure people can get to the open spaces. Yeah, I think that, and you know, like I said, that is tied, I think, to our transportation network. But I will get to more about the open space requirements. I'll get to that in a minute. Regarding the discrepancy, I'm not aware of any discrepancy in terms of funding of restoration projects. The city actually, we don't give funding, well, not yet, and we don't give funding yet, I think, to for restoration projects. So I think Director Gall has just worked on something, an agreement with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, where they will be helping to administer the distribution of some city funds for restoration projects. But the city doesn't distribute any. The only restoration project we've actually done on as a city, well, we haven't done any as a city, I believe. We have two in the pipeline that Greenvest are working on. There's the one in Back Creek, and then Director Johnson helped me. I think the other one's on Spa Creek somewhere, but that one's going to be the second one. Yes, Paul.
Isn't it correct whether it's Greenvest or a consulting firm before them? I'm not sure, but the city had contracted with experts to go around and help us identify the best bang for the buck on environmental efforts. So, you know, I'm looking at, you know, pollution per dollar, however you want to phrase it. And don't we have a list or a rough, you know, maybe category A, these are mandatory and those would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. We do.
So yeah, it was AECOM that did it first, and then Greenvest did it. And we talked about what Greenvest's work and you know, what their order of priorities and things like that. But we talked about that at the Waterways Cabinet, and I was going to weigh in on that, you know, later in the night. But I do think this needs a fuller conversation with the commission, and I'm going to suggest we have a fuller conversation about the Green Vest plan at our next meeting and get some information between the next meeting and look at it with an equity lens as well.
And Madam Chair, wanted to just let you know it's 8 o'clock.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you want me to do. Do you want me to continue
Yeah.
on, go faster, or just wait to do this
Go
until a
ahead,
future
go ahead.
meeting?
We will crunch the stuff behind you, and also
Okay.
Johnson has time behind you as well. But we will make our continuing business shorter. So yeah, go ahead, please.
And I'm happy to again to come back next meeting to continue this conversation and in any way. But Randy, to your point, if there is discrepancy in any kind of city funding for restoration, please do let us know. I definitely want to know about that. So November, I had, I already talked about that, the possible ban on developer contributions, just because we have a lot of development projects going on in the city. We have a few developers, and they do occasionally contribute quite a bit of money to some candidates. The second item here in November was requirement for landlord apartment complexes to provide electric vehicle charging if their tenant is willing to pay for it. I think this will be increasingly important as we shift to electric vehicles. You may have seen that California actually set a goal for, I'm blanking on the date now, was it 2025? No, 2030, sometime soon actually, where they want to phase out entirely gasoline vehicles. So under quick legislation I have for November is legislation to require permits for removal of any trees over 24 inches. This was actually included in the legislation that we had for the resiliency and Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. This was included in that legislation, but we ended up taking it out because we just thought it wasn't germane to that underlying legislation, and we didn't want to threaten the passage of that larger piece of legislation. So, but I still support the idea. So currently, city law is that if you have a tree close to a right-of-way, or if it's a tree that's taken down associated with some construction project, then there are certain requirements that you have to protect it or replace it. But if this is just some tree in your backyard, even if it's a large tree like over 24 inches, then there's currently no city law that requires you to protect it unless you're in the critical area. And so this would just require that anybody who, again, has a large tree would have to come in for a permit. In December, we have substantive legislation I had was creating development impact fees. We don't really have this. We did kind of do a little bit of this in the last budget, and I think Alderwoman Tierney supported me on this, but we increased the grading permit fee to actually cover the cost of the work that's being done and to cover the staff costs, because the grading, the staff really is there in response to the development impacts or to support the development themselves. And so it was important to have development pay for that. But there could be other environmental impact fees, ranging from anything from, I don't know, forest impact or to any kind of related infrastructure. Maybe an impact fee associated with the water if there's a significantly impaired waterway. I don't know. So this is just something I want to think more about. If the commission has any other thoughts on this in the future, please let me know. Because I believe the county, I'm always told that the county and other jurisdictions have more impact fees. We really don't have many. So again, for December, quick legislation, let's see, clean energy legislation requiring new development to include a certain percentage of renewable energy. And, the LEED certification would certainly deal with this to a certain degree. And I know this is, as Bevan is well aware, is probably going to be a problem for the historic district. But I think it'd be good to have new development start to include rooftop solar, at least to a certain percentage on some of their new construction. This is something I know they're doing in California. I haven't yet looked to see if they're being done in other jurisdictions locally. Yes, Paul?
Well, and I think everyone recognizes, for all of us, our duty on this commission is to help the city. So I am not speaking of my personal beliefs or feelings, because I agree with much of what you're saying, Rob, and I think you know that, everybody, our conversations. But a couple of points. Quickly on the developer no political contributions, I think you're going to get a small but super noisy group talking about First Amendment rights. So I would be very, frankly, I wouldn't bring that up for a while, because I think we ought to just focus on winning by showing a better way. And I think we're just going to have a First Amendment, a noisy group on that. But moving off that into the renewables, remember, I'm a profound scummy, so I want to keep showing, socially conscious, less money's involved. There's plenty of places where we can win, the environment can win on being lower cost. So instead of legislating, I'm more a carrot than a stick guy. And I'm going to, roll a bunch of things together here. Hannon Armstrong, which I think most of you are familiar with, they do larger scale sustainable infrastructure financing, but maybe maybe a lot of what we do is too small for Hannon Armstrong, but there's got to be a smaller player on that. I think it's more profitable if you look at a 5, 10, 15-year life cycle on making a building less leaky. It costs money up front, but you save money on the energy, and along those lines with solar. It's a capital cost up front, but the fuel's free. Long run free wins. I think we ought to be making economic arguments for these and not just legislating. I'm not saying you're wrong at all, but I want to do it on an economic end, because I think ultimately that's what's going to swing the people in the middle.
Yeah,
so I'd be interested in. Go ahead.
I was to say both very good comments, Paul, and I think if they'd be happy to talk more in the future about the any kind of clean energy requirements or incentives in the future. But you can see that legislation is. I wasn't going to think about it until probably December. So if there's, but I do see your point in terms of the developer contribution. It may not be worth the
I think you get a small but loud bite. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets us off message.
Yeah.
Rob, I have a quick question on your EV requirement for the landlords. If the tenant was willing to pay for them, do you mean to pay for the electricity or pay for the installation?
The installation. Well, presumably the electricity. I mean, I'm not sure how it would work in an apartment complex, but if you're somebody's renting out I guess that's actually the important place to do with the apartments. If it's a lot of people there, and if they want to have electric vehicles, they need someplace to charge. So, but maybe we could rethink that to have it be. They would have to the apartment complex would have to have some kind of EV charging infrastructure on their property.
Yeah, I think in some districts, some cities, they've done it by parking lots of a certain size, like that accommodate a certain number of vehicles, have to have X number of charging stations. And you might do it you might do it by units too. Have to have a certain number of charging stations.
So since we're looking at the later in the year legislation, can I suggest, Rob, that you send us this document, and then that we can have discussion about the later stuff maybe next month as well, because we did invite Director Johnson, and I don't want to keep her on late.
Yeah, sure.
So wrap this part up and send us
that makes perfect sense. So just to wrap up, as you look through this, you'll see a number of other pieces of like stormwater legislation, potential impervious surface cap, overhauling the stormwater code, some Forest Conservation Act tweaks. We found a couple of loopholes over the years that we need to close. And I think it's and then some new legislation regarding floodplain and resiliency, if we should allow development in the floodplain, updating the stormwater adequate public facility legislation. Let's see, that's about, and then at the end I have some general other ideas. So yeah, great idea, Bevan. So I'll just leave it there and say that again, I'll try to attend any future meetings. We can go over any more of this or anything in more detail, I'd be happy to. But again,
right.
I thank you for all your time and effort in submitting the recommendations to us.
Yeah, thanks for going over that review of like all the recommendations made at the beginning of this administration's term. So that was great to see too. All right, thanks. So yeah, send us that doc and we will, you know, dive into that and then, you know, see if we can get you comments or whoever's got expertise on different topics, we'll assign it to them and get you some feedback on that and then possibly have you for next month as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and any research, if you know of any other jurisdictions who are doing X, Y, or Z, that's always helpful as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Okay.
Rob, this is Bill O'Leary. Can you entertain one quick question?
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
I was just curious, going back to our 2018 memo to you, and we were talking about commercial recycling. Do we have any? Do we know what the rate of commercial recycling is for city businesses? Do we have any idea what that might be?
We do have that data. I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't know if Director Johnson or Kyle would
pretty
know.
low.
I don't know it off the top of my head. I believe they're required to report it, so I probably could get that information and get back, but I don't know the figure off the top of my head. Sorry.
Yeah, good question, though.
And I'm sorry, just one more, and I may have missed this, so I apologize, but I know earlier in the spring with the pandemic hitting us, I know you decided to pause on the plastic bag ban and fees for paper bags. So was that in your future legislation plans?
I forgot to add that on there. Yeah, it kind of depends. And I think some of the other things may depend on just how the pandemic's rolling out. If it gets worse this winter and we have another economic downturn, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely will add it on my list there at the end for things to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks. Now that Bill and Paul are here, we do have, so I wanted to just jump back to the approval of minutes. And we had 2 sets of minutes to approve. So I just wanted to just do them all together. So did anybody have any comments for July 9th minutes or the July 15th minutes or corrections? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the July 9th and July 15th minutes?
This is Ann Stevenson. I move to approve the July 9th and the July 15th minutes.
All right, do we have a second?
This is Bill O'Leary, I second.
All right, all in favor of approving, say aye.
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 All right, hearing none opposed, the minutes are approved. We also had the vice chair. I know Kate had volunteered to be the vice chair. Unfortunately, Mike Giblin, our vice chair, has stepped down. So did we have somebody to nominate Kate as the vice chair?
This is Ann Stevenson, and I nominate Kate to serve as the vice chair.
Okay, and then that term expires in January. We have to do this all over again in January. And do we have a second?
This is Bill O'Leary, I second that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Right. Was that Bill O'Leary?
Yes.
Okay, and you seconded? Okay.
Doesn't sound like you're getting a choice there, Kate.
It's a voluntold. Yeah.
That's
right.
Okay. All in favor, just please say aye.
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 Okay, it sounds like it's unanimous. So Kate is new vice chair. Thank you very much, Kate. So now we want to hop back to our new director of Public Works, Mike Johnson. So welcome to the city, and we're very excited to have you. I got a chance to talk to you just the other day, and he comes from Gaithersburg, where he was many years in the Public Works Department there, which is in Montgomery County. So we're just very excited to have you. And I asked Anne if she would lead this session. We had sent the letter on with lots and lots of questions on the new Department of Public Works building. So Anne, just let me turn it over to you, and welcome Director Johnson. And if you wanted to say something to us first, that's
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm glad to be here. Look, you know, I'm sort of you know, learning more and more about the city every day. But you know, the team is really good and very knowledgeable, and you know, I think we're going to do some really good things here in Annapolis. So look forward to working with everyone.
Okay, great. So Anne, let me turn it over to you to dive into our letter and all the questions. And I did talk to Director Johnson just the other day, and I said we have a lot of questions in there. He might not be able to answer them all in this, but it can be a continuing conversation.
Well, what I had done before Anne, or maybe I'll just mention this before Anne starts, is I put together a brief presentation. I kind of timed it to work within the framework that we have. I'm not sure if that still applies, but in that I sort of gave a brief overview in the beginning of where we are with the building, what kind of components will be. And then in the second part of the presentation, I answered every question that was in the July 22nd memo. So I don't know if you want to do it that way, because I see some people are calling in by phone. They may not be able to see the presentation, but I could read the question and the answer if that works.
All right.
Is that okay to do it that way?
That sounds fine to me. Anne, is that good with you?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
So what I'll do is I'll share my screen, and you know, for those who can see the PowerPoint, great. If you know, otherwise I'll just do my best to go through it in a way that is clear to everyone. If anyone has any questions, you know, please ask, and I'll sort of go over that. Okay, so I'm going to try sharing my screen now. I'm told I'm a techno moron, so bear with me while I try to to share my screen. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's see what happens. Can everyone see my screen?
See, yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to sort of start the. Okay, so the Annapolis Public Works Department, you know, there's a need we're sort of bifurcated. We have like utilities over at Chinquapin Round Road, excuse me, and we have the maintenance divisions that are over at Spa Road. You know, then we have our administrative offices over at Gorman. But for the operational parts, there's a definite benefit to them being located at an appropriately sized and designed maintenance facility. One of the challenges that we have with the arrangement that where they are currently is that neither of those facilities was designed to allow for easy compliance with the MS4 regulations. And I guess everyone knows that the MS4 regulations, which is an acronym for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, which is just really a large way of saying your storm sewers and the pipings that, you know, that sort of go to your outfalls, is that they have 6 minimum control measures that permittees are required to comply with, which are designed to safeguard surface water bodies, because stormwater is not really a treated discharge. But those facilities are not really designed with that in mind. And we also have further problems that some of the structural practices, like our salt dome, for instance, is a bit too small to allow, you know, a sort of like an environmentally sensitive way of loading it. And salt is dumped on the ground and pushed into the dome. And there's always residual salt that remains, and it's further compounded by being at the headwaters of the College Creek watershed. So, you know, there's some problems with that site. We also have sewer vector equipment. Those are the trucks that are used to sort of pump out the sewers or keep the drains, the sewer system functioning properly. And those trucks, because they have liquid in them, really should be stored in a heated space in the winter months. We don't really have a heated space to store them in. So, that's a bit of a concern in terms of life of the equipment. And those pieces of equipment are fairly expensive. And our new building is expected to commence construction in June of 2021 and be completed about a year later in June of 2022. The new facility will have, one of the things I've asked Betsy McKeon, who is the project manager for this, and she's doing a really great job with it, along with Donovan, who's assisting her, but Betsy's really doing an outstanding job on this, is to start the application for an MS4 permit, an industrial permit for that site. And the reason for that is this, that we have a general permit for the city, and it's sort of, embedded in that are certain types of discharges which our practices are meant to keep under control. But a public works yard has its own class of contaminants, if you will. Like we have oils and lubes and salt and grit. Maybe grit is not really so popular, but it could be there on site. And other discharges that really should be treated differently. The different practices, the housekeeping practices should be different. So I think that a best practice is for a facility like that to have its own industrial MS4 permit, separate from the city's MS4 permit. And that way the owners of that permit, who would be the supervisors who are in charge of the utilities and the maintenance divisions, would be accountable for making sure that the site is in full compliance with that permit. So the new facility will have that. We will also have offices for maintenance and utilities staff. We will have a heated storage building for key fleet vehicles. That's our Vector trucks, and also useful if we have very cold winters, that we can preload salt and sort of store it under cover, heated cover, so that the spinners don't jam and they eject large piles of salt. Sometimes you see that on the road and you say, wow, what were these guys thinking? That sometimes happens when the spinning equipment gets frozen, or the load gets frozen because of the temperature. It will provide adequate surface parking for fleet equipment and staff. And a big improvement will be that we will install a high arch salt storage building. The benefit of the high arch, and I have a graphic further down which I'll go in, but I'll just quickly explain what it is that when salt is delivered, it comes in triaxle or tandem trucks, often triaxle trucks. These are very long trucks that are sort of, bringing in maybe 25 or 30 tons of salt at a clip. And those vehicles, because of the length of the body, they really need a tall building. You really want a very high building for the truck to drive directly into the building and then offload the salt. And the reason for that is this, that one, it allows the building to be filled more efficiently without using a conveyor system, which is sort of like the older way of doing it. And secondly, there's no salt that is dumped on the ground in front of the building, so that we are containing all of this salt, which is essential for de-icing and safety of roadways, safe operation of roadways, but is also a contaminant. But we're containing that inside of a sort of like enclosed structure, so that through proper housekeeping, the amount of salt contamination should really be minimized. And between the industrial permit requirements and this structural practice, this higher building, we feel that we should improve significantly over what is occurring at Spa Road. Furthermore, the site will have a hotspot stormwater protection measures, and I'll go over those a little later on. We have ESD, which is environmental site design, stormwater VMPs, and the building will be a LEED silver building, which as per the city code. Forest conservation is a big issue on this site. This site had had a previous developer who had a permit to do some mitigation, tree removal and mitigation in the 1-to-1 ratio. They sort of backed out of the deal. The deal seemed to have collapsed. And I think they did the tree removals. And I don't think that the mitigation was actually done, I'm told. So we will assume their requirement for mitigation. So for our construction, we need to remove about half an acre of trees. And then the previous developer removed about 0.68, nearly 0.7 acres of trees. And we will add that to our allotment. And we'll be replanting 1.18 or almost 1.2 acres of trees in accordance with the city's 1-to-1 mitigation requirements. So that's it in a nutshell. So I think that were there any questions on that sort of very quick overview of what the building will look like? We're still at the design development phase, so that means that we haven't begun construction. Like the phases are schematic design, where it's very conceptual design development, where you begin to put some kind of structure on the plans. And then once that's approved, we move to what's called the construction document phase, which are the documents which will be ultimately bid or used to sort of build the structure, build the site, build the facility. So we're at the DD phase. We're almost at the end of design development. And once we finalize the height of the salt structure, I think we'd be ready to move forward to the construction document phase. Were there any questions on that?
I guess I would just chime in that one of the reasons why we had some preliminary phone calls with Betsy and Donovan on your staff and wrote the letter when we did is that we weren't sure when we would be most helpful as a commission in terms of which phase you're in the project development. And we didn't want to ask specific questions about stormwater management or the energy efficiency attributes of the building and ask them, sort of too late in the process, which I think has happened to us in the past. So we are glad to have this conversation now, and I realize that many of our questions were sort of specific and maybe sort of too early in the process in some ways, but we did that intentionally to try to be able to be helpful when they would sort of come into play.
Okay, understood. And I think that at the design development phase, we are able to begin to give some rough concept ideas of what we would like to put into the building or have in the facility. And as we get into the construction documents phase, based on budgets and based on other things that more detailed design may reveal, there may be minor changes, but usually it kind of, once you're at the design development phase, you kind of have a general idea of what the ultimate facility will look like. It's not going to be 100%. It will sort of be a little more refined. There'll be some tweaking as the team gets further into the details of the design. So your questions were right on time. Were very timely, and I will then go into that and sort of attempt to give answers to it. And if there are any questions that still remain, or if anything is still unclear, I will attempt to answer that. If I can't, I will get the answer and come back to the commission with an answer on that. So going in, so on July the 22nd, the commission sent a memo.
Director?
Yes, Alderman.
Sorry, I just had a quick question on the forest. You said I didn't realize you were going to be removing additional forest, but is there space on site for you to do the reforestation on site, or do you think you have to go off site to do that?
I suspect that maybe we'll have to go off-site to do some of it. I will have to double check with that, but looking at the plan, I don't believe that it's totally replaceable on-site. It may not be totally replaceable on-site, but I could confirm that, right? I will confirm that and get back to you. But it looked to me like you didn't have enough space to do everything on-site. but ultimately the city of Annapolis will have the required canopy cover that is required, even if it's not done at on Hudson Street at 39 Hudson. Okay, so so the first question was, how will education and or visits or technology choices be made to optimize the site's educational opportunities? You know, during construction, this is sort of like a kind of a funny site, I think, that during construction, visits to the site will be extremely limited because of the, you know, the nature of that type of construction, right? It has to be done carefully, and the developers accrue liability for having people on the site. And in thinking about it, this type of facility is not really very suited for tours, for non-city personnel access. So I would sort of have to have a better understanding as to what sort of educational goals are attempting to be met before I could sort of commit to anything. Because public works yards, I mean, the typical public works yard has a lot of heavy equipment, constantly moving. People do not expect pedestrians to be moving around within the site, and it's a greater liability for the city to have sort of access to PW yards. Normally that is a very controlled space for that purpose. I know that like Washington, DC had a plan. I looked at one of their plans, and they seem to have designed an environmental center into the building so that they could control the access to their site. Our site is not designed with that in mind. So it is meant to be a functional public works yard. And I would have some concerns with sort of like people feeling that it's a site that they can come in to sort of observe this, that, and the other. I think that is a risky proposition. So a little clarity as to what is intended is probably needed before I could give a really good answer to that.
I'll jump in there. And one of the things we thought about was experiential learning for some of the, you know, young people in town that were interested in environmental, you know, engineering or environmental, like stormwater projects. And so, I mean, we thought it might be helpful for them to see the site beforehand and then see it during construction of the stormwater runoff part of the project. And I don't know if that happens before you do the actual building or afterwards, but we thought it would help, you know, be helpful to have some experiential learning opportunities for our young people in the city.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
I think we had two other thoughts. The first is that the creek restoration at the base of the site will continue on to behind Monarch Academy. And so we were wondering if there were ways that we could sort of optimize the connection that will exist because of the restoration of the creek. And Jackie can correct me if I've gotten that wrong. And I think the other goal or the other thought we had is that we don't have the opportunity to build so many new buildings in Annapolis. And so if we as a group, if you have the opportunity to choose between one technology over another, and it gives us an opportunity to see if that particular kind of permeable paving or that particular kind of energy efficient technology would be appropriate for other installations in city buildings or otherwise, this is our opportunity to sort of ask those questions and think creatively. And, you know, we have encountered resistance to suggestions of some kinds of new technologies and new solutions in places where they would have a big impact if they didn't go well. So if there's an opportunity to say, try out a permeable paver in one parking spot, and if it's, you know, a terrible kind of permeable paver, we'll replace it. And we've had an opportunity to test it out as a community. This again is our shot, and we would love to think creatively about how we can try something here and not say try it on Main Street, And, you know, and then when it is time to think about permeable paving on Main Street again, we know which kinds of technologies we might like to suggest for that kind of installation.
I see. Okay. Okay, I understand a little clearer as well. No, I think that what we might do, and this is something that we would have to discuss with the developer who's doing the building, the design builder who's doing this for us, is you know, there might be periods of time when we could organize tours of certain types of construction. And I think Bevan had asked if the stormwater infrastructure would be built first before the building is put in. So usually the infrastructure is put in first, and then you build up, you know, the buildings and so are erected on the site. So there may be periods, you know, when it is safe. It wouldn't be safe if there's a lot of earth moving equipment moving around and a lot of trades working where the site is a bit too busy. I think that is a risky proposition, but once things are sort of settled down between phases of construction, it might be possible, and that's something that we could revisit further down the road as we get into the construction. So I'll just move on. In addition to the green roof on the administration building, can the team include multiple technologies and/or materials to optimize the site's potential as a learning laboratory? This could, for example, include solar panels, permeable paving or brick materials, native plants, high performance HVAC technologies, water reuse and conservation, etc. The site is currently designed using a series of stormwater management practices to treat runoff from the site prior to discharging it into the back creek. Many alternative practices were considered, but there were some controlling factors. One, we had to install the hotspot treatment locations where we are storing more than 1,000 tons of road salt. So that shouldn't be close to the creek, because that's sort of like a spa road, a rehashing of spa road, where it's not really the right location to put it. And our hotspot treatment infrastructure also dictates where that building should go. And also the soils, I spoke with the engineers, the geotech engineer, and he told me that the site has low permeability, and therefore that sort of limited where what sorts of alternative treatments could be used. For instance, the permeable pavers would not really work there because the site doesn't perk. It can't, it has too much mica or something in it, or clay, or it's not really going to, the permeability rate is too low. I think he told me it was like 1/2 inch an hour, and that is way too low for any sort of site to use an infiltration sort of a technology. So there's that, and then also on our sites we are running extremely heavy equipment. Right, our trucks are, when loaded, are quite heavy, and pavers and those sorts of treatments are not really going to hold up very well under that sort of load. But more so, the in situ soil isn't permeable enough to allow that technology to work, and they had looked at that, and that was eliminated because of that reason. Next question was, we encourage the city to realize multiple benefits from this project by using it as a hands-on learning lab to educate local youth from a focus of those from underprivileged communities about the benefits and installation of environmental site design practices, either observational or more hands-on. The AEC would like to work with the city to facilitate this experiential learning opportunity. The stream restoration project is proposed to start in the grounds of Monarch Academy, and the proximity to the school could provide additional educational opportunities. We'd be glad to sort of discuss the ESD that was used on the site and other sustainable elements. And what I've done typically is that we would sort of tie this around an Earth Day exercise, so that we find that that's a useful way to sort of educate the public. And it can be part of the one of the minimum control measures of the permit, which requires like public education. I think that was mentioned before earlier in the statement by one one of the members, committee members, commission members. And I would sort of envision it in that way, that could be something that could be ongoing, whereby you could build entire educational type programs around an Earth Day activity where you sort of looked at how the SDs functioned and had a somewhat of a discussion. That's something that's very useful for young learners or people beginning to develop an interest in environmental science or physics or the general STEM fields. The active construction area on this building lot appears to have been cleared of its tree cover, leaving a bare earth lot. We would like to hear about the sediment and erosion controls that are already in place. I encourage the city to lead by example and install more than the bare minimum controls. All sediment control measures on site were reviewed and approved with the previous project that was approved. And we have like a stabilized construction entrance, reinforced silt fence, super silt fence, earth dikes, and a sediment basin. And furthermore, the site is not bare earth. It is not denuded of vegetation. So you have a very low risk of soil moving. I think that there is some grass that is growing, and the root mesh would sort of hold the soil in place. Some trees were removed, as I mentioned, and about 0.6 acres. And but the site is sort of stable. The site is stable. We don't have any problems with soil, with violation of the sediment and erosion control requirements that the state has. How does the project team anticipate coordinating development with the creek restoration project and all the partners involved? The two projects are independent and we can't contractually commingle them. So you'll have one entity who will be doing the stream restoration, and they will have their own general conditions and their own contract and et cetera, and things of that nature schedule. And the developer or the design builder who is doing our site would have their own contractual arrangements with the city. And you would not be able to mix the two, unfortunately, even though they're sort of like close to each other. Contractually, they have to be kept separate for, just for a variety of reasons, contractual reasons and liability reasons to the city of attempting to commingle things that really neither party had something to do with. So they would be separate, but ongoing, possibly some overlap of work. Has the design team considered pervious pavement for the parking spots?
Back to the question. So I think we weren't talking about commingling work. I think we were talking about scheduling. So, so the construction at your site doesn't blow out the other stream restoration or other way around, how you're coordinating timing and phasing and things like that.
Oh, each contractor would be required as part of the general conditions of the contract to ensure that they do not impact adjoining or abutting sites, so that we can't get into what's called either the means or the methods of doing the work for the contractor. That gives the city tremendous liability if we do that. So once the contract has been sort of awarded, the contractor is then responsible for delivering the job to us in accordance with criteria that are established. And one of the criteria is exactly what you said, that they could not blow out the work that is done on the stream, and the same would apply to the contractor working on the stream. They couldn't impact our contract. And that's why they're sort of separate in that way. And we don't anticipate any problems with they wouldn't be in each other's way. They wouldn't be impacting each other's schedules. They would be close by, but they would sort of go concurrently and but be totally independent. Has the design team considered pervious paving for the parking spots? Could you consider multiple pervious products in different places on the site so that you can test and or demonstrate different solutions for other projects across the city? Parking sites seem like a low traffic and low weight location to test pervious pavers, including permeable bricks. This can help pave the way for installation of some of the more high profile places in the city, like Main Street parking spots. As I mentioned before, this is a public works yard, and the pavements will sustain extremely heavy vehicular loads throughout their operational life. That's just because of the nature of the facility. Bricks would not be an acceptable material to use here. And furthermore, as I mentioned, percolation tests were done and the in situ soil failed. So permeable pavement would not be a viable technology to use here at this site because of that. It failed the criteria. How will the salt dome be protected from leakage runoff? Please note that leakage from the salt dome killed the rain gardens at the current DBW site, and salt is leaching into Spa Creek. Salt is very harmful to aquatic life and plant life, and it is critical that the same does not happen at the new location, which is in the Weems Creek watershed. The new salt structure will have full height concrete walls on a foundation, and it will be covered. In addition, the proposed height of the building will allow the salt delivery trucks to offload inside of the building as opposed to on the ground, as is in the case on Spa Road. There will be a concrete pad directly in front of the salt barn that can be easily swept, and that'll be part of the housekeeping measures ensconced in the industrial permit. This will eliminate the salt from being dissolved and washed into the Weems Creek watershed. Enhanced housekeeping will also keep salt and spillage from dump trucks. You know, at the end of the seasons, the trucks always have some salt in them, and they're washed off and the salt is sort of recaptured. And the city is also implementing a source control protocol as part of their stormwater pollution prevention plan, as well as conducting outfall sampling to verify that the average salt content or salinity is below the toxicity threshold. So as I mentioned, really, there are two measures. There are structural practices, and the building is a structural practice. It's very different from Spa Road, where because of the height, the salt is dumped on the ground. Many loads of salt are dumped on the grounds. The loaders then attempt to push it into the building, and eventually they push up against the inertia of the mass, and it becomes increasingly more difficult for them to move the salt in. The more that you load, it becomes that sort of like, you can imagine if you were pushing a pile of dirt, and the bigger the pile becomes, the harder it is for you to push it. That's the inertia of the mass that the loaders, even though they have tremendous horsepower, there is a limitation to what they can push. So I think that the entire type structure associated with that type of dome sort of leads to, contamination in spite of your best efforts. You will have a lot of salt that is, sort of on the ground, and, it's just really a poorer practice. Then the current thinking is to have buildings tall enough for you to load inside of the building. And that way you get away from, that as being an issue. And here we have an example of what we are currently, this isn't our site, but this is an example of what we do at Spa Road. So these are the triaxles. And you notice that's a massive truck with a very high bed. And it dumps, several tons of salt on the ground, and the loaders attempt to push that into the building. And you can see the problem just from what, and, right, so you can just look at it and see that that's a problem. That will be a problem. And this is a section through what our new building will look like. So you can see that this is a graphic of our loader, but I think the height will be in excess of 30 feet. So it's easy for the salt trucks to drive directly into the building, dump, and then the loaders can go and push it up, sort of pack it in more efficiently. But it's all done inside a contained structure. So none of that mess that you saw before in the previous graphic will be left on the ground. So that sort of helps, in addition to the other items that I mentioned. This project includes removal of the fuel system at Spa Road. We would also like it to include remediation of the soils that are contaminated from the salt runoff at Spa Road. The decommissioning of the fuel tanks at Spa Road and any site remediation will be separate projects. They can't be commingled with this. So that statement is not totally correct, right? It's not a part of this project. And we would, when we decommission the tanks at Spa Road, we would have a separate contractor who specializes in fuel tank pulls to decommission the tanks. And if we have to do remediation at Spa Road, if it is impregnated with salt or oils or whatever, we would sort of have a separate contractor to deal with that. But that would be done under a future contract, not under this facility contract. We are pleased the city plans to treat 125% of stormwater. However, we are concerned about that plan to disturb the wetlands to create the step pool conveyance to treat the stormwater. We'd like more information on any alternatives that were considered, including alternative placement of the buildings on the lot. This is from our design team, and they said they changed the location of the salt barn to move it away from the steep stream banks, and that's a smart move. With the previously approved design at the site, a storm drain outfall was originally proposed at the stream closer to the eastern property line, but it was concluded that the use of a step pool conveyance system, would provide greater environmental benefits, including providing qualitative stormwater treatment in its sand, wood, chip underbed, and converting concentrated flow from the storm drain system into shallow groundwater flow through its pools and subsurface seepage layers. DPW design continues with a similar design with the step pool conveyance system, directing a runoff from the development to the stream. There's also mention of filtering water from the garages with carbon filters before it is discharged into the step pool area. We would like to know more about what this water is being used for prior to discharge, what types of pollutants it will carry, and how much of the pollutants will be removed by the carbon filters. There are several hotspot areas on the site, and I'll go over that. There are 3 hotspot areas. Building number 1, that's our vehicle maintenance and repair location. We have an internal, we'll have an internal building drain that will collect oil, grease, vehicle fluids, and other pollutants resulting from work on vehicles. And this will be directed to an oil grit separator located outside of the building and then discharged into the sanitary sewer system once it is been cleaned. The concrete wash area at the rear of building 1, that's for vehicle washing. The concrete bay at the exterior rear of building 1 is designed specifically for vehicle washing, and that's part of the permit as well. It is also considered a hotspot operation. Vehicle wash may contain chlorides, sediments, oils, greases, and things of that nature, which can degrade water quality. In order to prevent stormwater contamination, a trench drain is proposed at the downstream end of the concrete wash bay along its entire length. All runoff from the vehicle wash will be collected in this drain, where it will be directed immediately downstream to a storm scepter, and I will show an example of what that is in a moment. This manhole type is designed to remove suspended sediment, free oils, and pollutants from runoff, and to serve as a pre-treatment from runoff from this area before directed to the storm drain system. The runoff will be further tested for the ESD volume in a downstream storm filter system. The storm filter system filters runoff through filtration media housed in cartridges that meet the MD requirements for ESD volume. This then discharges clean runoff into the storm drain system. And the salt barn, material bins, and adjacent paved areas, outdoor storage. While the salt barn is covered, as I mentioned before, to prevent exposure to rainfall, it does have a slope slab directed to the front of the building. The material bins are not covered and also have slope slabs based on the intended use of the storage buildings. The stormwater pollutants that may be generated and could contaminate the stormwater include sediment and nutrients, as well as oil and grease from vehicles that are involved with this operation. In order to prevent stormwater contamination, all runoff from this hotspot operation is contained in the area immediately in front of the buildings, where the pavement grade is sloped to direct our runoff into one contained inlet. This inlet is to be fitted with a catch basin insert specifically designed to catch oil and sediment and prevent these from entering into the storm drain system. This catch basin insert was served to provide pre-treatment of runoff from this area, which will then be filtered further in the downstream step pool storm conveyance system. Keep in mind, of course, that dissolved salts cannot be filtered out in that way. So we would do our best. The housekeeping would be an essential part of controlling that. And this is, I'll just show some of the hotspot. This is the storm filter. So storm water is drawn in the green arrow there. It's piped, it goes through the media, and then clean water comes out at the other end when it is functioning normally. And it is designed to remove total suspended solids, phosphorus, heavy metals, and oils, hydrocarbons, so oils and lubes. So that's one measure, that the storm filter. Another one is the storm scepter. And this is largely designed to remove total suspended solids and oils. And it's really a large manhole with a filtration apparatus inside that allows suspended solids to settle and clean water to sort of make its way out, as was mentioned. And then we also have the Storm Sentinel catch basin insert, and that was what was mentioned. That removes like TSS, total suspended solids, and any grits that could be on the ground, sand or things of that nature. And that's largely just an insert that is placed inside of a catch basin. And you know, it functions in that way. And with proper maintenance, which would be ensconced in the permit as part of the housekeeping requirements of the permit, you know, it will function for many, many years, effectively treating stormwater discharges. Public Works notes that this lot was prepared for another development that did not come to fruition. How much of the lot was cleared of trees before PW obtained the property? We understand that another half an acre of forest on the easement was removed on the 6.9 acre lot to accommodate the PW buildings. What kind of easement is the remaining forest subject to? Is one-to-one mitigation calculation based on the additional half an acre that was removed, or the entire acreage that was removed by the prior owner to ready the property for development? And as I mentioned before, the city in my opening sort of like statement, the city will assume the 0.68 acres that the previous mitigation that the previous developer did. You know, so we will be doing 1.18 acres. So that's our half an acre plus the 0.68 that they removed. As far as an easement, I don't know that there were any easements. I didn't really have a good answer on that in time for this meeting, so I can check on that just to be certain, and I'll get back with an answer on that. We're pleased to learn that PW will meet the city's code one-to-one replanting requirements for trees removed. We'll also want to know how many trees will be planted to mitigate removal of the specimen tree. I don't know that it was tied specifically to the specimen tree, but the project will increase the city's tree canopy, which is in keeping with the city's comprehensive plan 2036 tree canopy goal that Alderman Savage referred to in his presentation. Is this facility identified as a Resource Conservation Recovery Act conditionally exempt small quantity generator or a small quantity generator? The Resource Conservation Recovery Act largely deals with hazardous wastes, and the only item that we have on our site that would be covered under that is waste oil, and that would be containerized above ground and disposed of in accordance with EPA law or requirements. What steps are planned for the handling of hazardous materials and hazardous wastes, for example, oils, cleaning solvents, antifreeze, that are typically found in vehicle repair facilities? Hazardous wastes are required to be solid. I don't think that our facility is considered to have hazardous wastes. You know, hazardous waste has to be solid. That's one of the first tests to determine if a waste is hazardous. So the antifreeze and cleaning solvents would not be covered under the federal definition of a hazardous waste. But to answer the question, I understand the intent of what the question was, is that we would take scrupulous care, as was mentioned, through the structures that we have in place to ensure that we are containerizing waste oils and waste cleaning and waste antifreeze and any other spoils that result from the work that we perform routinely at this site. And that would be containerized and manifested, and disposed of in accordance with prevailing law, state and federal laws pursuant to items of that nature. So even though it's not a hazardous waste in the technical sense, we are treating it as something that can contaminate stormwater, and we would not allow that to occur at this facility. What steps are planned for the handling of hazardous materials and hazardous waste, example, oil? I think maybe that's a repeat. Okay, sorry. Are there plans for underground or above ground storage tanks for product use and waste liquids? Above ground tanks will be used to store waste oil and solvents. Will used tires be stored on site? Yes, and then they will be disposed of in accordance with law. Will repair work involve the use of spray paint either in a paint booth or individual aerosol containers that will result in the generation of waste paints and cans? No, we are not equipped to paint our vehicles, and no painting will be done on site. That would be done off-site at an appropriate contractor who would handle that for us. How are used lead acid batteries managed? They're disposed of in accordance with state law. Is this facility required to obtain an NPDES permit? Yes, our site, it's not required, but our plan is to apply for an industrial permit, MS4 permit, or NPDES permit for this site, because for the reasons I mentioned, that we have unique sets of discharges that are very separate from what the general permit for the city should cover. So I feel that an industrial permit would allow us to have a better functioning site than sort of it being subsumed under the city's general permit. How will the design fit in with the need for a spill prevention control countermeasures plan? The design will comply with the MDE stormwater regulations. Will the garage spaces be heated and cooled with the same system as the office spaces? What technologies is the team considering for the buildings? Infrared, variable refrigerant flow, high performance heat pumps. Building 1 has this from our mechanical engineer, sophisticated, super high efficiency heating system. The garages will have dedicated outdoor air system, and building 2 will be handled differently. Geothermal doesn't work here because of the cost. I think the latitude doesn't allow it to really be a very cost effective option for us. But all in all, this building will be a LEED building, so our systems will be very energy efficient and suited for the use. We primarily plan, as I mentioned, to heat the building the vehicle storage building to safeguard the life of our Vector equipment and other equipment that is sensitive to temperature. Will both buildings be built to LEED standards? Yes, LEED Silver. What efficient technologies are part of the design? Lighting controls, insulated garage doors, water reuse, etc. We'll have light controls, occupancy sensors, insulated garage doors. We do not plan to use any gray water, so no water reuse. However, there will be low limited flow devices to ensure that we're not wasting water, or we're doing what we need to do with a minimal amount of water needed. Is the team considering solar for the buildings and/or entering into a power purchase agreement for a solar developer? Solar is not being considered as part of this design. I'm not sure that looking at our roof structure that it would really generate a lot, be other than a token effort, because we don't have the area that might allow that to work. Our roof area is not, usable area is not that large. How will staff be supported and encouraged to bus, bike, walk, commute to the current site? Will locker rooms include showering for foot bike commuters? I mean, the city purple and green bus routes are possibilities of staff being able to use public transit to get to work. But we sort of designed the parking on site to assume that staff would primarily be driving to the site. If we're able to sort of make changes in the future where more public transit access is available, or if the bike project moves forward, then staff can bike to work and we can make accommodations for bike racks or things of that nature to sort of support that. And will this site be connected to the Poplar Trail as part of the planned WE Trail? It's not part of this project. If WE moves forward, it's a possibility, but it will require coordination with the county because Hudson is a county road. So any bike paths or anything that are put on it would have to require an Arundel County approval, pre-approval. And I think that's it. So I think I kind of stayed within the time frame I was given. So I'll avail myself to anyone who has questions.
Can I start off with a follow-up question? And first of all, thanks very much for those really detailed responses and for telling us more about the sort of building program and how the site was required to meet certain requirements for your department. That wasn't part of the presentation to the public. It was just sort of like what the new design will look like. So it's really helpful to get that background information, and I really appreciate it. Could we start with that last point about the WEE? I think one of the other projects that's in the SIP for this year is to do some preliminary studies or some additional work about the continuation of the trail. And I wonder if your point there in the presentation means that something's changed since we, I think, heard that in July.
No, I wasn't saying that, but given that it's not, it hasn't been built and, it requires some coordination between the different body politics, the county and the city. In designing the building, we had to design it as if it did not exist for what is currently existing. And if we have other connectivities that allow cyclists to, people to bike to work, we can adjust things on site to accommodate cyclists. So that was the point I was making. So because it doesn't exist at the point at which we're designing the building, we're designing it as if it takes years to materialize, which it could. I don't know. I don't have a date as to when it will.
As somebody who lives on the Poplar Trail, who then has to switch over to West Street, I'm sort of counting the days. Okay. Well, if there's something that our commission can do to help facilitate making those kinds of connections or convening those conversations, I hope you'll let us know. And then I guess one sort of overall question to ask you is to think about some of the questions we asked about specific technologies, in particular, sort of like demonstration stormwater and permeable paving, and ask you how we might work with you and your team to make them part of a different site if they, are not suitable for this site for the many reasons that you described. Maybe there are other opportunities we can find together to explore some of those things somewhere else.
Definitely. I do believe that there are other sites that might be better suited for that technology. And, as we do our CIPs, we would sort of have that as a consideration. And if it works, we definitely would be really thrilled to work with you on demonstrating, or experimenting with different types of permeable bricks or pavers. As sort of like a living lab, if you will, to sort of see how it functions. But just the public works yard isn't the right place for that. It wouldn't last very long. I see Kenyatta. I'm sorry. Is there, I heard you. They called you something else, but I'm saying Kenyatta, right?
Yes, I'm a junior, so
Okay.
I go by my middle name mostly. I don't know how it
I see.
popped up like that,
Okay.
but yes, Randy Kenyatta. Either.
Randy. Okay, Randy.
How you doing? Much
Yeah, I'm
work,
good.
much great work done on the PowerPoint and your work in your position. I just want to tip my hat to you, and I look forward to meeting you and talking more with you.
Absolutely.
One thing I was just curious about, the city being the capital of Maryland and wanting to essentially be a example of how to go forward in sustainable design, sustainability in the going forward in the future. I was just wondering, were you planning to install any type of legacy building part activity or like naming of different areas or to different people that are, because Public Works has been for the long time predominantly run by there's a lot of African American men and women who work in that institution. And so I was just wondering, with your new design, I think it would be really cool to maybe add in some type of highlighting some leaders in our community or relevancy. And if you're interested in learning more about the city in that regard, you can definitely link me up if you need to. My family's been living in this city for over 175 years. So.
I think the matter of naming buildings is more mayor and council type issue. It's above my pay grade.
Not just buildings, but
no, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
But I think the aldermen who are on the call, not to put them on the spot, but they would be the ones who would sort of be able to move that idea forward in terms of like whether a building is named after someone. But I know Annapolis has a very rich history of in the African American communities, as a long and storied history here. So I definitely would be interested in learning more. So I would make contact with you. Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody. I know we've kept everybody about 15 minutes longer than we had promised, and we still have our continuing business. So I want to suggest that we alter our agenda to just do some of these updates by email. I know I can do the Waterways Cabinet up. That's just updates. It's no decision making. New development, I don't think we have reviewed anything, so we can check with Racine on that over email. And then the comp plan input, we haven't done more than we've done up to this date, so there's no update for that. I did want to give Randy a chance to report out because he had been working on the environmental diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice report. So I wanted to at least give him a chance to tell everybody what the goal of that is and what we were going to be thinking about doing with that moving forward. So Randy, did you want to take a few minutes?
I'm sorry, I said, yeah, let me pull it up here. It's real quick. To get off of mute there.
Right, I do that all the time.
So basically, we just, we had an idea to try to provide some emphasis within the commission to issues that and activities as it relates to trying to be more dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as it relates to our environmental industry, and trying to encourage more of a growth mindset in that regard, and kind of trying to see what activities and things we can take place to try to equate that disproportionality in some regards as it relates to workforce development and as it relates to environmental education. So that was pretty much it. And I kind of wrote up a little intro, kind of an overview type of thing. So maybe I think what Ms. Bevan was mentioning about things could be done by email is maybe take a look at it and offer some feedback or thoughts about it. And for the most part, the diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice report would basically seek to promote equity, inclusion, and justice in the protection and improvement of our natural health and welfare, the environment of the city of Annapolis through culturally appropriate public education activities and programs, community engagement, outreach, and service, and participation in the city's environmental policy. That's pretty much it.
Evan, that's crying up to be a resolution.
That was kind of what I was just kind of touching on when Mr. Savage was mentioning some things. I think a lot of things that have been mentioned throughout our meeting today have kind of touched on bits and pieces of a lot of potential great opportunities there, a lot of synergy.
Yeah, and so I had been talking to Randy and to the Chesapeake Bay Trust about doing some outreach to our local community, our Black and Hispanic community, about the opportunities for the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. And we had been making efforts to try and expose them to and educate them and push them towards that opportunity. But we have been unsuccessful so far. But we were talking about to my former colleagues at the trust, and they told us that there's a grant available for outreach activities. So I was talking to Randy about maybe possibly us going to try and get that grant, and and doing some of that outreach. So that's a further discussion we can have next. I think the grant might be due in about a month. The application might be due.
It's due on October 30th.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if we even need if this has to be an AEC activity, but I would like it to be, because I would like us to work on things like this, and don't know if we need a vote to go out and pursue a grant like that, or if we should just get a sense of the commission members to do something like that.
Well, I think we can share it out and let them look at the RFP, and they can kind of weigh in, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think this is legislation or policy, so I don't think we do need a vote on this. But that's my opinion.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so
Bevan, have we gotten other grants in the past as a commission?
Not that I can recall.
And what would it mean for us to apply versus the OEP to apply?
Well, whoever gets the grant has to do the outreach, but the thing is, you don't get paid unless they have an application, unless you actually successfully deliver an applicant. Now, they don't have to get selected, but you have to deliver some applicants. So I don't know if OEP has capacity to do that, the kind of outreach, but if members or a few people on the commission do, then it's something that we could look into doing as our activity, not the cities.
Or it could be like just a letter of support, type of deal, and then I have a different entity like you could use to, I guess, submit the grant through, and maybe just supported by the city,
Yeah.
Just an option.
Okay. Yeah, that's an option too. All right, well, thanks, Randy, and we will continue this conversation and look into that grant, and also want to, in between this meeting and the next one, want to look into the Green Vest plan with you and with an equity lens, and see, if there need to be some adjustments made to that. going forward. But as it is, it's 9:20 right now. I know, Kate, we had a question on there about SAYC access, and I know you had followed up on that. Did you want to give a quick update on that before we wrap it up?
It sounds like the city manager's working on this and trying to, is working with the Eastport Civic Group to try to find a resolution based on where things are now in the development. So I don't think we need to do anything further. Our comments were helpful, and if hopefully they're looking to find at least something they can do at this point in the process. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's that. And then if I can just offer one other thing, I think the West Annapolis group is meeting again in October. That they're doing some stuff with Stantec, like some planning, and sounds like they're doing their own plan in addition to the comprehensive plan. But anyway, so we should weigh in on that whenever the draft plan is released. They did release the conceptual thing in August, and then there's another meeting in October.
Oh, is that like an area sector study for the plan?
I think so. It's a ward, maybe Jackie knows more about this. It's being run by Stantec, the consulting.
Oh.
Series of presentations. They're basically trying to do some planning around what it could look like in the future.
Oh, okay.
For, yeah, near Taylor Avenue, Monterey Avenue. Yeah.
Okay.
So it says it's an opportunity for city residents to help envision the future of the area. So
Oh, yeah.
we should comment on that.
It sounds like a sector study for the comp plan, but yeah, so why don't you can you send us a link to that or wherever you saw it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, I think the other stuff we can just send by email unless Jackie or Racine, you have anything for us.
No, nothing pressing. We'll update, my usual report, and I can just send that out to you guys.
Okay.
And we are next week, the 7th is the first Wednesday of the month. Now, do you want to meet the first, this is a discussion you can have offline, via email, but the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we depend on Hillary to give us dates that we can have the Zoom platform.
Okay.
So I think we'll just do that by email as well.
Okay.
I'll send out an email.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I don't think we need to meet next week, so, but thanks, Racine. All right, with no other business, then thank you all for sticking in there for like 25 minutes overtime. And just wanted to close out this meeting and adjourn the meeting. And thank you all and welcome Director Johnson to the city. And we're very glad that Kate's our vice chair for the rest of the year.
Yes, we are.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bevan. Awesome.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.